The winds carried sorrow across Willow Creek like a mournful hymn as Katherine Avery knelt beside the freshly dug grave, her slender fingers tracing the rough-hewn wooden marker bearing the name Thomas Avery. The Arizona Territory's summer of 1878 had been unforgiving, but nothing compared to the harshness of losing her husband of 3 years to a sudden fever that swept through their small homestead like wildfire. "I made your favorite stew today, Thomas," Katherine whispered, arranging wildflowers at the base of the marker. "I know you always said I put too many carrots in it." Her voice caught, a single tear tracking down her dust-stained cheek. "I put extra in today just to spite you." The cemetery sat on a gentle slope overlooking the town, bordered by cottonwood trees that provided fleeting shade from the relentless sun. Katherine had taken to visiting daily since they'd put Thomas in the ground 2 weeks prior, talking to him as if he were sitting beside her on their porch swing. "Mrs. Henderson from the general store asked about you again. I think she's sweet on you, even now." Katherine attempted a laugh that dissolved into a quiet sob. "I told her you were still just as stubborn as ever." Lost in her grief, she didn't notice the tall figure approaching from behind, hat in hand, until his shadow fell across the grave. "Madam," the deep voice startled her. "Begging your pardon." Katherine turned, hastily wiping tears with her handkerchief. The man standing before her was lean and weathered, his face partially obscured by a neatly trimmed beard. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest. The silver star pinned to the vest caught the sunlight. "Deputy," she acknowledged, straightening her black mourning dress. "Deputy Flynn Quinn, madam. I don't mean to intrude on your grief." He shifted, uncomfortable with the intimacy of the moment he'd interrupted. "I heard you talking." "Couldn't help but overhear about that stew." Katherine's eyes widened, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I didn't realize I had an audience, deputy. Wasn't trying to eavesdrop." Flynn's gaze drifted to the grave marker. "Thomas Avery. He was a good man. Helped me fix a broken wagon wheel when I first rode into town." "That sounds like Thomas," Katherine said softly, "always helping strangers." "Not quite strangers. We shared a drink at the saloon once or twice." He twisted his hat in his hands. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Avery." Katherine nodded, touching the wedding band on her finger. "Thank you. I should be getting home. There's stew on the stove that needs tending." "Allow me to escort you back to town," Flynn offered, extending his arm. "These parts can be dangerous for a lady alone." Katherine hesitated, then gathered her shawl. "I've walked this path alone every day for 2 weeks, deputy, but I suppose today I could use the company." As they walked down the dusty trail toward town, Katherine found herself stealing glances at the deputy. His eyes were a striking blue against his sun-browned skin, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd seen his share of trouble but wasn't eager to find more. "How long have you been in Willow Creek?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Coming up on 8 months now," Flynn replied. "Sheriff Daniels needed an extra gun after the trouble with the Barker gang last year." "I remember. Thomas worried they might come back." Katherine's voice softened. "He talked about buying a shotgun, but we needed the money for seed instead." Flynn nodded. "Farming's a tough life out here." "It is," she agreed, "but it was our life, now." Her voice trailed off as they reached the edge of town. "Now you take one day at a time," Flynn finished for her. "That's all any of us can do." They stopped at the crossroads where Main Street met the road to the outlying farms and homesteads. Katherine's small house sat at the edge of town, a modest structure with a vegetable garden in the front yard. "Thank you for walking me back, deputy," Katherine said formally. Flynn replaced his hat. "My pleasure, Mrs. Avery, And if you'd permit me to say that stew smells mighty fine even from here. Thomas was a lucky man. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Good day, Deputy. As Katherine watched him walk away, she felt something stir within her chest, not happiness. Not yet, but perhaps the faintest whisper that someday happiness might be possible again. The following afternoon found Katherine at the grave again, this time with a small book in hand. "I brought your favorite, Thomas," she said, opening the volume of Whitman's poems. "Remember how you'd read Song of the Open Road when the winter seemed too long? You said it made you feel like spring was just around the corner." She read aloud, her voice carrying on the breeze until the shadows lengthened across the cemetery. When she closed the book, she noticed a fresh bouquet of wildflowers that hadn't been there when she arrived. "Someone's been by to see you," she murmured, touching the yellow blooms. "You always did have more friends than me." "Not wildflowers for him," came Flynn's voice as he approached from the same direction as the day before. "For you, Mrs. Avery." Katherine turned, surprised. "Deputy Quinn." "I heard you reading as I was passing by," he explained. "Didn't want to interrupt, but I left those earlier. Thought they might brighten your visit." "That's very kind," Katherine said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Flynn shrugged, a hint of embarrassment crossing his features. "My mother always said flowers help heal a wounded heart." "Not sure if that's true, but figured it couldn't hurt." "Your mother sounds wise," Katherine replied, gathering her belongings, "and thoughtful like her son." "She was," Flynn said quietly. "Lost her 5 years ago to consumption." Katherine's expression softened with understanding. "Then you know this path I'm walking." "I do." He offered his arm again. "May I?" This time Katherine accepted without hesitation. As they walked, Flynn asked about the book she carried. "Thomas loved poetry," she explained. "Everyone thought it strange a farmer who could recite Whitman from memory, but it was one of the things I loved most about him." "Nothing strange about a man enjoying beautiful words," Flynn said. "Though I confess most of my reading these days is wanted posters and sheriff's bulletins." "Not much poetry in those," Katherine said with a small smile. "No, madam, there is not." Flynn chuckled, the sound warm and unexpected, though sometimes the descriptions can be creative. "Just last week, we got one describing a bank robber with eyes like a startled mule and teeth resembling a broken picket fence." Katherine laughed, then covered her mouth, surprised by the sound. It had been so long since she'd laughed that it felt almost foreign. Flynn smiled at her reaction. "It's all right to laugh, Mrs. Avery. I expect Thomas would want that." "Katherine," she said suddenly. "Please call me Katherine." "Katherine," Flynn repeated, the name feeling right on his tongue. "And I'm Flynn to my friends." They reached her house sooner than either expected. Katherine hesitated on the porch steps. Would you care for some coffee, Deputy Flynn?" The invitation surprised them both. Flynn removed his hat. "I'd be honored, Katherine, but I'm due at the jail for night watch. Perhaps another time." Katherine nodded, relieved and disappointed all at once. Another time. The days fell into a pattern. Katherine would visit Thomas's grave, talking about her day, reading poems or passages from books he had loved. And more often than not, Flynn would appear, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with a small token, a river stone with an interesting pattern, a feather from a hawk's wing, once even a jar of honey from the hives at the Wilson farm. "The Wilsons send their regards," he said, handing her the honey one afternoon. "Mrs. Wilson says this is good for baking." "How thoughtful," Katherine replied, examining the golden jar. "Though I must confess, my baking skills leave much to be desired." "Thomas always said my biscuits could double as horseshoes in a pinch." Flynn laughed. "I'm not much of a cook myself. Been surviving on beans and bacon for most of my adult life." Well, that won't do, Katherine decided. You must come for supper tomorrow. I may not bake well, but I can manage a decent roast. The invitation hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning beyond a simple meal. Flynn studied her face, searching for any sign of regret. Are you certain? He asked carefully. I wouldn't want to impose. You wouldn't be, Katherine assured him, surprising herself with her certainty. 7 o'clock. 7 it is. The next day, Katherine spent hours preparing her small home. She swept and dusted, polished the few pieces of silver she owned, and prepared a roast with vegetables from her garden. She even wore her blue dress, not the black mourning clothes she'd worn every day since Thomas's passing. As she worked, she found herself talking to Thomas as if he were sitting in his usual chair. I know what you're thinking, she said, arranging flowers on the table. That it's too soon. But Deputy Quinn has been kind, Thomas, and I'm so lonely. Her voice broke on the last word. Is it wrong to want company, to feel something besides this emptiness? The knock at the door came precisely at 7. Katherine smoothed her dress, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Flynn stood on her porch, hat in hand, wearing a clean shirt and his best vest. His hair was slicked back and he'd trimmed his beard. In his free hand, he held a small package wrapped in brown paper. You look lovely, Katherine, he said, his eyes taking in the blue dress with appreciation. Thank you. She stepped aside to let him enter. You clean up quite well yourself, Deputy. Flynn handed her the package. Nothing fancy, just a small token of appreciation for the invitation. Katherine unwrapped it to find a book of poetry, Tennyson's collected works. The binding was new, the pages crisp and untouched. Flynn, this is beautiful, she breathed, running her fingers over the embossed cover. Ordered it special from Denver, he admitted. Thought you might enjoy adding it to your collection. Katherine placed the book carefully on the side table. Thank you. It's perfect. Dinner was a pleasant affair, with Flynn complimenting her cooking and Katherine finding herself laughing at his stories about the town's more colorful characters. After the meal, they sat on the porch with coffee, watching as stars appeared in the darkening sky. May I ask you something, Katherine? Flynn's voice was serious, breaking the comfortable silence. Of course. How did you and Thomas meet? Katherine smiled at the memory. I was teaching at the school in Prescott. Thomas came to deliver firewood one winter day. He was so shy he could barely look at me, but he left a carved wooden bird on my desk when he thought I wasn't looking. She paused, remembering. It took him 3 more deliveries before he worked up the courage to ask me to the town social. He sounds like a good man, Flynn said quietly. He was. Katherine looked up at the stars. What about you? Has there ever been someone special? Flynn was silent for a long moment. Once. Her name was Sarah. We were engaged before I joined the army during the war. I came home to find she'd married a banker from Chicago. I'm sorry, Katherine said, instinctively reaching for his hand. It was for the best, Flynn said, his fingers closing around hers. She wanted security, fine things. I couldn't have given her that life. And what kind of life do you want, Flynn Quinn? Katherine asked softly. His blue eyes met hers in the dim light of the porch lantern. An honest one, with someone who sees the world for what it is but loves it anyway. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then Flynn gently released her hand and stood. It's getting late. I should go. Katherine walked him to the gate. Thank you for coming, and for the book. Thank you for the meal, Flynn replied. Best I've had in years. He hesitated, then leaned forward and placed the lightest of kisses on her cheek. Good night, Katherine. As she watched him walk away, Katherine touched her cheek where his lips had been. For the first time since Thomas's death, her heart felt lighter, as if some of the grief had been replaced by something else, something warm and hopeful. The next morning, Katherine went to Thomas's grave with fresh wildflowers. As she arranged them, she found herself talking as she always did, but with a new undercurrent of confusion. "I don't know what I'm feeling, Thomas," she admitted, sitting beside the grave. "Deputy Quinn Flynn, he's been so kind. And last night when he kissed my cheek, I felt—" She trailed off, guilt coloring her words. Is it disloyal to feel this way, to want to smile again, to want his company? The cemetery was quiet, offering no answers, only the whisper of wind through the cottonwood leaves. "I'll always love you, Thomas. Nothing will change that. But I don't think I can live in this half-world anymore, not speaking to anyone but you." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I need to know it's all right to live again." "He'd want that for you." Katherine gasped, turning to find Flynn standing a few feet away, his expression solemn. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I shouldn't have interrupted something so private." "How much did you hear?" Katherine asked, mortified. "Enough." Flynn moved closer, kneeling beside her. "Katherine, any man who loved you would want you to be happy again, Thomas included." "How can you be sure?" she whispered. "Because if something happened to me, that's what I'd want for someone I loved." His eyes held hers steadily. "To find joy again, to live fully." Katherine studied his face, seeing sincerity in every line. "Why did you come here today?" Flynn reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This came for you. Sheriff asked me to deliver it." Katherine took the telegram with trembling fingers, reading the brief message. Her face paled. "What is it?" Flynn asked, concerned. "It's from my sister in Denver," Katherine explained, her voice shaking. "She's ill consumption. She's asking me to come. When will you leave?" "The next stage is tomorrow morning." Katherine folded the telegram carefully. "I don't know how long I'll be gone." Flynn nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Your sister needs you." "Yes." Katherine touched Thomas's grave marker one last time. "I need to pack and make arrangements for the house." "I'll look after things here," Flynn promised. "Your garden, the house, they'll be waiting when you return." Katherine looked at him gratefully. "Thank you." He walked her home in silence, both acutely aware that their newfound connection was being interrupted before it had truly begun. At her door, Flynn took her hand. "Write if you can," he said simply. "Let me know you're safe." "I will." Katherine squeezed his hand. "And you'll write to me. About the town, about yourself. Every week," he promised. "I'm not much for fancy words, but I'll do my best." The stage left at dawn the next day, carrying Katherine toward Denver and her ailing sister. Flynn stood in the street, watching until the coach disappeared from view, his heart heavier than he'd expected. The weeks stretched into months. True to his word, Flynn tended Katherine's garden, repaired loose boards on her porch, and kept her house safe. Every Sunday he brought fresh flowers to Thomas's grave, acknowledging the man who had loved Katherine before him. And he wrote letters describing the changing seasons, town gossip, his daily work as deputy. He wrote about the stars on clear nights and how they reminded him of her eyes. With each letter, his feelings grew stronger, spilling onto the pages in increasingly unguarded ways. Katherine's replies came less frequently, short notes about her sister's condition and the bustling city of Denver. She never spoke of returning, and as winter approached, Flynn began to wonder if she ever would. December brought snow to Willow Creek, transforming the dusty streets into a white wonderland. Flynn continued his visits to Thomas's grave, brushing snow from the marker, sometimes talking to the man he'd barely known. "She's still in Denver," he said one cold afternoon, his breath visible in the winter air. "I keep hoping she'll come home, but maybe she's found a new life there, a better one." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I never meant to fall in love with her, you know. It just happened. I'd give anything to see her happy, even if that means she stays in Denver." "Would you really?" Flynn spun around, his hand instinctively moving to his gun before registering the voice. Katherine stood a few feet away, bundled in a heavy coat, her cheeks pink from the cold. "Katherine," he breathed, hardly believing his eyes. "When did you get back?" "This morning. I came straight here." Her eyes moved to Thomas's grave, then back to Flynn. "I heard what you said." Flynn removed his hat, suddenly nervous. "How much?" "Enough." She smiled, echoing his words from months before. "My sister is better. The doctor says she's out of danger now." "I'm glad to hear it," Flynn said sincerely. "Your house is ready for you. I kept everything in order, so I've heard." Katherine stepped closer. "Mrs. Henderson at the general store told me all about how the deputy has been looking after the widow Avery's property and bringing flowers to her husband's grave." Flynn looked embarrassed. "It seemed like the right thing to do." "It was." Katherine's voice softened. "Flynn, I read all your letters. Many times. They kept me going through some very dark days." "I meant every word," he said simply. Katherine nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I know. That's why I came back. Not just for my home or for Thomas's memory, but for you." Flynn's heart thundered in his chest as Katherine closed the distance between them, her gloved hand touching his cheek gently. "I came to say goodbye to Thomas properly," she continued. "To tell him that while I'll always love him, my heart has found room for someone new. Someone he would approve of." "Katherine," Flynn whispered, afraid to hope. "I love you, Flynn Quinn," she said clearly, her voice steady despite the tears now falling freely. "I think I have for a long time. I just needed to be sure to know it wasn't just gratitude or loneliness." Flynn pulled her into his arms, holding her close as if afraid she might disappear. "I love you too, Katherine, more than I ever thought possible." Their lips met in a kiss that spoke of patience rewarded, of grief transformed into something beautiful and new. When they finally parted, they stood together at Thomas's grave, Katherine's hand firmly in Flynn's. "I'll always remember him," Flynn promised. "Always honor his memory." "I know you will," Katherine replied, placing her other hand on the wooden marker. "Goodbye, Thomas. Thank you for the love we shared. I think you'd like Flynn. He's a good man like you." As they walked away from the cemetery, the setting sun cast long shadows across the snow, painting the world in shades of gold and rose. Flynn stopped at the cemetery gate, turning to face Katherine. "I don't want to rush you," he said carefully. "We can take all the time you need." Katherine shook her head, smiling. "We've already taken our time, Flynn. Life is too precious and too short for unnecessary waiting." "Then marry me," Flynn said, the words tumbling out before he could reconsider. "Not today or tomorrow, but soon. When you're ready." Katherine's smile widened. "I think spring would be lovely for a wedding, don't you? When the wildflowers are blooming again." Flynn lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her fingers tenderly. "Spring it is." They continued toward town, walking close together in the gathering twilight. At Katherine's house, lights glowed in the windows and smoke curled from the chimney. "I took the liberty of starting a fire before going to meet the stage," Flynn explained. "Thought you might appreciate coming home to a warm house." Katherine looked up at the cozy scene, then back at the man beside her. "It's perfect. Will you stay for supper? I bought provisions in town." "I'd like that very much," Flynn replied, following her up the porch steps. Inside, the house seemed to welcome them both, the fire crackling cheerfully in the hearth. Katherine removed her coat and gloves, moving about the kitchen with familiar ease. Flynn watched her, memorizing every gesture, every smile, every glance she cast his way. As they prepared the meal together, their movements fell into natural harmony, as if they had been doing this for years rather than for the first time. Their conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and brief touches a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing while passing a plate. Later, as they sat before the fire with cups of coffee, Katherine leaned against Flynn's shoulder, content in a way she hadn't been since before Thomas's illness. "You think it's strange," she asked softly, "that I found you at his grave, that our story began there?" Flynn considered this, his arm around her shoulders. "No," he said finally. "I think some loves are born from sorrow like flowers growing from ashes. It doesn't make them any less beautiful." Katherine looked up at him, touched by his words. "For a man who claims not to be good with fancy language, you have quite a way with words, Deputy Quinn." Flynn chuckled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Only with you, it seems." When spring arrived, it brought with it a profusion of wildflowers across the hills surrounding Willow Creek. Katherine and Flynn were married in the small church on the first Saturday in April, with the entire town in attendance. Katherine wore a dress of pale blue, with wildflowers in her hair and Thomas's carved wooden bird pinned to her bouquet, a remembrance of the love that had shaped her and led her, ultimately, to Flynn. Their life together began simply and honestly, with Flynn continuing his work as deputy, while Katherine reopened the small school that had been closed since the previous teacher left town. They moved into Katherine's house, adding a room and expanding the garden. On Sundays, they would sometimes visit Thomas's grave together, leaving flowers and sharing news as if with an old friend. Year after their wedding, as summer approached once more, Katherine and Flynn stood hand in hand in the cemetery, a small bundle cradled in Katherine's arms. "Thomas," Katherine said softly to the grave, "I'd like you to meet Thomas Flynn Quinn. We call him Tommy." The baby slept peacefully, unaware of the significance of his name or the tears that shimmered in his mother's eyes. Flynn's arm tightened around Katherine's shoulders as she continued. "I think you would approve," she whispered. "He has your namesake and he'll know your stories. He'll know how his mother loved twice, completely and without regret." Flynn touched the sleeping child's cheek gently. "He'll know that love doesn't diminish when it's shared. It only grows stronger." As they left the cemetery, the setting sun gilded the distant mountains with golden light. The future stretched before them, bright with promise and possibility. Katherine looked up at Flynn, her heart full. "You ever think about how it all began?" she asked. "How if you hadn't overheard me talking to Thomas that day, we might never have found each other?" Flynn smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling with happiness. "I think some souls are meant to find each other, one way or another. We were just lucky enough to recognize it when it happened." Katherine nodded, knowing he was right. From grief had come healing, and from healing, love, a love born at a graveside but destined to flourish in the light of a new day, with each sunrise bringing fresh hope and the certainty that even in the vast wilderness of the West, no heart truly walks alone.